Healthcare, although we are all consumed by the U.S. healthcare conversation, even if you look around the world,
Right.
there's a notion that says, how do I get to outcomes? How do I get to effectiveness? How do I do what I need to do in a world of rising chronic disease and a model that probably doesn't scale? So in the US, we have our own version of that, right? But you go to other economies and you see, as the middle class rises, there's an expectation of healthcare and of education that is rising faster than you can build schools or hospitals or teach teachers or doctors. So what is the role of technology in getting best practice into the hands of practitioners in a model that could scale? And so you look at Africa, for example, and whether it's healthcare or it's teachers, you've got to find a way to get best practices into their hands and not wait for traditional infrastructure to build out. And so that's some really exciting stuff, right? How do you use mobile phones for healthcare? How do you use, memory keys, and you load it into your laptop and you go off to do whatever you're going to do, and then a month later you can download what you learned and get your next increment of new insights, right? Some work we're doing at Boston Children's Hospital.
Oh, really?
That one's a fun one because the initial treatment of a child, particularly an emergency room situation with a child, is critical, right, to the care of the child. And how do you get that expertise more broadly disseminated? And Boston Children's has been very focused on that. And so we've been helping to do that with some technology. Inclusive of, have you ever put an IV into a child before? If not, watch this video, pass this quiz, now go do it, right? So that you're not inadvertently encouraging dangerous practice by transmitting information, right? So I think there's some real stuff in healthcare. And similarly in education, right? This drive towards outcomes, what am I getting for the tuition that I'm paying? What can I do about retention rates, whether it's in high school or in college? Graduation rates, useful performance. All around the world we're hearing governments say, well, I don't get it. I've got jobs that employers say they can't fill, and so they're importing workers. I've got unemployed people in my own city. Why can't I get supply and demand to match? And a piece of that actually comes from both sides, right? How can we help employers better articulate what they're really looking for with enough headlights that the education system has any chance of actually responding? And how can we get enough insight about the student, not just to coach them through each class, although we'd like to do that, but to actually give meaningful advice on what kinds of careers that child might be good at? So they don't bang their head against a wall because this is what my older brother did, I should do it too. Well, you're a different human, right? Here's maybe a better choice for you and a pathway you could follow that connects to what the local employers say they're needing. So I see a lot of that. And then on the city side, so I'm kind of working my way through the industries. On the city side, cities are such a great place to do work. And we're often finding now that it's the small to medium-sized cities that they're more ready to take action, and they're more ready to have the conversation. And I think that's a combination of they don't have a big IT staff of their own. They're willing to ask for some advice, maybe, but also they have more of a sense of shared destiny and a little less silo mentality than you get in the larger cities. So some really interesting things about how do I engage my citizens? Yeah, I'd like to use technology for kind of traditional infrastructure. Can I run my water system better? That kind of stuff. But how do I also use technology to actually listen to my community and to let them know that I am listening? Right? So You know, think about a zoning change in a small city, right? Today, what do? We call a town meeting in the local high school. Only the people with an axe to grind show up, and as many of them as can make it to the microphone get to say what they thought.
Yep.
Right? That's no way to know what the actual population thought, particularly the less prosperous members who may not have the self-confidence to show up in that room. Right? So how can you use technology to actually get a better sense of what the community is thinking and to iterate with the community on some compromises? So there's some work we're doing in Canada that's like that, where they're developing a waterfront area and have now used technology to engage in a dialogue with the community about, well, what if we did this or what if we did that, and how do we compromise how people feel about that real estate? I think the other cool city story that I like to tell is about traffic in Nairobi.
Okay.
So every city in the world would tell you that they have terrible traffic, and they all do. I would put Nairobi's up against anybody's. You have an old English-style city with ring roads, right,
Yep.
with circles. So not ring roads, with traffic circles. And if you go to Nairobi, you will find traffic at a standstill because there is no bypass road. So every truck from Uganda that wants to get to the port in Mombasa is going to go through the middle of Nairobi. And so traffic's not moving. There are trucks of all possible descriptions on these roads. And on the traffic circle, you'll see traffic signals. And then you'll see traffic cops overriding the traffic signals based on what they can see that they think might make the situation better. To say it is not optimized would be an understatement. Our research team in Tokyo said, gosh, there must be something we could do to help. And so they took webcam data and a roadmap of Nairobi and old-fashioned network analysis to fill in the missing points and started trying to predict how traffic develops in Nairobi, quite successfully.
Really?
And so then they were able to get a little pilot project going where the traffic cops would get advice on their cell phones of what a better intervention would be, so that they're not just directing traffic based on what they can see, line of sight, but on a larger piece of the city. And it really is having an effect. And the best part, in some ways, those Japanese researchers have never yet been to Nairobi, but they were able to help. And we didn't go to the mayor of Nairobi and say, first buy a bunch of sensors.
Yeah.
We've worked with available data.